migrants in India. When we talk about migration, is a form of mobility in which people change their residence location across defined administrative boundaries for a variety of reasons, which may include the pull and push factors of the cities. It's an integral part of development, contributing to the dynamics of urban growth and economic and cultural vibrancy of cities. The migrants are the floating population basically, as they alternate between living at the source and the destination locations. Next slide. Migration in India. The migrants in India constitute about 30% of the Indian population. There are two types of migrants in India, that is long-term migration and the short-term or seasonal migration. They are employed in the subsectors including construction, domestic work, textile, bricklines, transportation, mines, and etc. There are some migration corridors in India. The source destinations include Eastern UP to Maharashtra states, Bihar to Delhi NCR, Odisha to Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, and Rajasthan to Gujarat. The causes of migration, I have highlighted some of them, like uneven development of rural areas, the disparities inter-regional and amongst different social economic classes, improvement in road infrastructure and telecommunications of the urban areas, changes in the pattern of demand for workers and consequent changes in labor market structure, attractive features of cities, nature of urban policies. The positive impact of social inclusion of migrants in India. So because there is a lack of time, I will highlight only some of them. Like the importance of child education is there because of the social inclusion in rural areas basically. Migrants provide a basic to the social ideas, skills and innovation and knowledge in the urban areas too. They bring sustainable development, they lead to the economic development and growth of the areas. And there are also some psychological and social benefits on the side of migrants as they gain self-confidence within them. Then social exclusion of migrants in India results in it basically leads like poor social and legal protection, exhausting working conditions. They basically work for about 14 to 16 hours a day and they are given less wages as compared to the work they do. They are discriminated politically also. They don't get the right to participate in elections or vote because they don't have their IDs. Then gender discrimination, health problems, insecure or hazardous jobs. Then there are some government initiatives or policies for the migrants in India, like Interstate Migrant Workmen Act 1979, which provide right to raise industrial conflicts in courts. Then the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, NREGA, that we all know. International Labour Organization, with collaboration with Ministry of Labour and Employment and with the state governments, have worked to promote decent working conditions for the migrants. Then Paryavaran Evam Pradyogiki Utthan Samiti of Allahabad also is doing a great job in Allahabad. Then City Makers program is the urban poverty and intervention to cater the need for comprehensive network to address homeless in the city. Steps for promoting social inclusion, they are general steps. I will highlight some of them, like building up the capacity of panchayats, the urban boards, then establishing migrant labor cell in each labor department, ensure to formal banking facilities for migrants, provide bridge courses and remedial education for children there. Then providing mobile crèches, mobile schools to the children living in urban and rural areas. Then providing gender-sensitive and age-sensitive policies to them, ensuring democratic participation in elections also, and providing better health and sanitation facilities to them. I have taken an example of Ajivika Bureau from Rajasthan. It's an basically bureau which works for migrants. It has promoted Rajasthan Shram Sarathi Association, which offers targeted financial services to migrant workers and their households. They provide microloans, insurance, assistance in opening bank accounts, pension and savings advice. They also have a provision of Gullak Bachat for the women. Then they register workers in the welfare board to get scholarships, pensions, and emergency assistance to construction workers. Then concluding with ahead, basically I think we should take a community level effort. The NGOs and the trade union can also play a great role in including these migrants in our society, and the government also should make policies which are inclusive in nature. Thank you.
Title is Social Inclusion Through Rural Tourism in Rajasthan. The World Bank defines social inclusion as the process of improving the terms for individuals and groups to take part in society. Social inclusion involves a movement towards creating equal opportunities for all citizens. Rural tourism is relatively a new concept which can bring great economic and social benefits to the local people. Rural tourism helps to sustain local ways of living, art, music, dance and culture. The colorful village life of Rajasthan truly represents the way the people of this state have lived for centuries. I would like to now focus on the tribal communities of Rajasthan. The highest concentration of tribals can be noticed in the district of Banswara, Udaipur, Dungarpur. Around 90% of the tribals belong to the Bhil and Meena communities. Other tribes include Damon, Garasya, Saharia and Katodi. The rural areas of Banswara, Dungarpur, Udaipur represents tribal culture in its original form. Dungarpur village attractions are the best to see the raw beauty of Rajasthan. In order to encourage handicrafts and attract tourists, Shilpgram was set up, which has various huts representing the tribal farmer communities of Bhils and Saharias. Now the objectives of my paper: to analyze the challenges currently being faced by the tribal communities for social inclusion in Rajasthan, to find out the ways and means how rural tourism can be an important instrument of socio-economic development and help in the upliftment of the society, to examine the ways through which awareness among the community can be raised regarding the role of rural tourism. Methodology is based on the secondary data and information available in various reports published by the Department of Tourism, Ministry of Tourism, Art and Culture, Government of India, Microfinance Report, UNICEF India Report. The various challenges faced by the tribals are of poor health condition, student dropout rate, problems of unemployment and less availability of jobs in the area, degradation of local handicrafts and products, culture alienation, gender-based exclusion. Rural tourism can be an important milestone for the tribal community, as it can bring financial benefits, revitalizing the community's traditional resources, social integration between tourists and the rural community. The literacy rate of the tribals would increase as demand for education will increase. Proper training would enhance skills of the tribals and build self-confidence in them. Most importantly, there would be increase in prestige and recognition of the tribal community and better relationship among the tribal community. It has been found that there are various initiatives taken by the government and the private organizations for social inclusion in the rural areas. These initiatives are in the form of conducting social activities in the rural areas, creating awareness about the development programs for the local artisans, special programs in rural areas like conducting village tours. But there are a large number of tribal people who are not aware of the facilities provided by the government. So it is important to find out ways and means to make the tribal community aware of such facilities and conduct various training programs and workshops for them. Finally, I would like to conclude by saying that rural tourism in the coming days will emerge as an important tool for the development of rural areas and the advancement of tribal communities, benefiting them socio-economically. For this, government, both state as well as central, should come up with various strategies and programs to bring the tribal community in the forefront. Thank you.
No, any questions? We'll take. Okay. Maybe one or two questions, I think. One or two questions.
Any questions?
No questions? Okay, so I think I was privileged to listen to a very diverse set of and excellent presentations. And, it was indeed an eye-opener for me to know that the process of inclusion or the question of inclusion can be and exclusion can be looked at from so many various facets. Thanks to all of you. I know all of you are hungry and we'll go for lunch and come back. But I think the last word is from the compere.
Lest you forget, I request Professor Nisha Yadav to present a token of our gratitude to the chairperson, Professor Pranav Banerjee. I request Dr. Aarti Sharma to present a memento to our invited speaker, Professor Narayan Bari. On behalf of the IAS family, I extend my deep gratitude to our chairperson, Professor Pranav Banerjee, for sparing his valuable time to chair this session. I thank Professor Pradeep Chundawat and Professor Narayan Bari for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. Thank you very much.
We now begin with the fifth technical session. We still have some audience to join us, but I think because we are running short of time, so we might as well begin right now. Neoliberalism, development and inequality are organically connected. Neoliberalism conceptually, in our opinion, comprises market fundamentalism, efforts of the corporate world to monopolize over resources and institutionalization of individualism as a core value. These components of neoliberalism lead to cutthroat competition as well as dual identities. But such pathologies become oblivious in the age of technological revolutions. Social units start believing that they can meet all their needs through technological devices. As a result, technological development becomes a defining principle of integrated development which finds space with the active support of urbanization and industrialization. This points out towards the anti-rural nature of neoliberalization. The underlying dimension of this narrative is rural-urban dichotomy, in which rural inequalities are not given much significance. Thus, the interface between neoliberalism, development, and inequality raises the issue of center and periphery with modified meanings. Periphery within center and centers within peripheries explain the developmental strategies nowadays. Whether these efforts are myths or realities constitute those ideas which, in our view, form the basis of this technical session. I now hand over to the compere. Thank you.
On neoliberalism, development, inequality, and social inclusion. I request the chairperson of session 5, Professor Rajveer Sharma, invited speakers, Professor Pranav Banerjee and Professor Rajiv Gupta to take their place on the dais. Professor Rajveer Sharma, University of Delhi, presently a senior fellow in ICSSR and holds a prominent position in academics and research bodies. He has authored many books, articles and research papers for Indian and international journals. One of his recent books is titled Urban Governance in India, Major Issues and Challenges. We welcome you, sir. I request Professor Nisha Yadav to accord floral greetings to Professor Rajveer Sharma. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. I now request the chairperson, Professor Rajveer Sharma, to kindly take over for subsequent proceedings.
welcome this afternoon, friends. Dr. Nisha Yadav has given a very beautiful kind of a background and the perspective for the debate and the discussion on the theme of this session. I think we are all aware that there is a debate which is going on locally as well as globally about the impacts of globalization, marketization, privatization, liberalization on the issues of exclusion, inclusion, and also the questions of equality. And even on this issue, we know that there is a debate going on between two very eminent scholars. One is Amartya Sen and the other is Jagdish Bhagwati, if I am correct, sir. And both of them are giving their own arguments. One is focusing on growth as a means of reducing poverty, providing employment, generating income, and therefore enhancing inclusion. And he is also arguing that the charity or subsidies may not be the ultimate answer for promoting justice or equality in the society. On the other hand, Amartya Sen basically is arguing that globalization has contributed more towards inequalities, injustices, the gaps are increasing, unemployment is increasing, and it is globalization is functioning in favor of the few, the rich, the privileged. And therefore, the state will have to work on the lines of welfare state. We cannot abdicate the role of a welfare kind of a society. And through welfareism, I think he says that questions of inclusion and justice can be better addressed. Though I don't think that he is also completely negating liberalization or globalization. So therefore, with these words and also echoing the perspective which Dr. Nisha Yadav has presented before us, we now begin the session. I would request the speakers to be brief because brevity. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. We have a very distinguished kind of an academic and intellectual with us. In fact, this is a proud privilege for me to be with such a grand academic, great academic this afternoon, Professor Pranav Banerjee, who will be giving us a talk on the theme of the day on neoliberalism, development, inequality, and social inclusion. I would not like to stand much between you and Professor Pranav Banerjee. I request Professor Banerjee to kindly present his ideas.
Thanks a lot to the chairman for giving me this opportunity, and thanks to the IIS University for organizing this workshop, this national seminar, which is an interdisciplinary one. In fact, I am particularly happy with this interdisciplinary approach because what has been happening for quite some time is that economics has been playing a very dominant role and being started to influence policies, that is including public administration, which is the chairman's subject. It influences management, it has influenced political science, and it also unfortunately has started to influence other disciplines like, which should not be influenced so much, like sociology and even psychology. Or at least social psychology. I have a quote from here, from one of the great management gurus of the modern period, Sumantro Ghoshal. And this is what he says about the influence. One of the things that he says, about the influence of economics on the other disciplines like psychology, social psychology, and so on. It says that as far as economics is concerned, we begin our conceptualization, our theorization, based on certain basic principles or certain basic assumptions about human behavior, or even go to take it beyond about human nature. And that is that people are essentially material, they want more of material things, and that everyone is self-interested in the pursuit of material goals. So everyone is self-interested and tries to get more and more. So everything is looked at from this perspective, and we have what is called in economics the homo economicus, that is one type of human being everywhere, the rational, so-called rational human being. And this, unfortunately, is affecting other disciplines. For example, friendship. Friendship ties of people are now analyzed by sociologists as means for individuals to use social networks to enhance their personal influence, power, or pay, and so on. And social psychologists increasingly resort to the same assumptions about human nature when studying how people interact with others. Now, this is something which is influencing, this basic approach is influencing others, and it is actually not a desirable thing in the sense that it should not be a one-way street, and it should be an interchange of basic ideas and of approaches. You may ask the question, what is wrong with this? After all, you can begin theory with certain basic assumptions. Well, what is wrong with this is that social sciences is very different from natural sciences, and therefore what you believe in is something which takes on a social force. For example, if I drop something, if I drop this, no, not the glass. If I drop this, for example, I can predict the velocity at which it is going to hit the floor. And it does not matter whether you think anything that is our views are immaterial. So predictive values in physics, for example, does not depend on what people believe. But what about the stock exchange? Will the stock exchange prices go up or will they go down? Can it be predicted independent of people's perceptions and beliefs? The answer is no. If all of us believe that stock prices are likely to go up, then we are going to behave in a manner and buy stocks, and therefore stock prices will go up. If all of us believe that it is going to fall and we withdraw, then stock prices will fall. So social phenomena is very different from natural phenomena, and therefore the predictability independent of beliefs and ideas and ideology perhaps is stretching it too far. And therefore it is very important for us to look at this idea of the fundamental beliefs and then ask the question that, and put this topic in perspective, ask the question, what is this neoliberal beliefs? What have they been propagating? What is the ideas behind these theories and the policy prescriptions? And second part of the question would be that what will be in what way has it actually been put in practice? So let's begin with the theoretical aspects first. Well, yesterday I had some opportunity to listen to a few speakers, and one of the speakers, Madam Kaushik mentioned that, well, it's you don't have to talk about neoliberalism, it's liberalism going on for quite some time. And the answer is yes and no. The ideas in economics has been that people through self-interested behavior will act in such a way so as to provide social good. And as you know, one of the famous quotes in economics has been of Adam Smith, which says that it is not out of the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer or baker that we get our supper, but by appealing to their self-interest, that is their profit motive. So economics has believed that self-interest can reach or lead to, if a mechanism is there, can lead to social interest. However, over the last century, there have been very, very notable exceptions to this. And one of the exceptions was that, well, what happens if there is pollution? That is what they call, economists call it externalities. What happens in the case of defense, what economists call public goods? What happens in the case of monopolies? A monopolist controlling everything, where that is imperfect competition. What happens in the case of when information is not there? And the answer to all of these was that in all these cases and some other cases, the government is needed because the market fails to achieve the social objectives. So if market does not achieve it, which is called market failures, then the state should come in, and there was a strong case for government intervention, and the state actually increased in size from about less than 10% or 5% in many cases of GDP, even in developed countries, public expenditure being about 5% of GDP in many developed countries at the beginning of the previous century, till about 1970s or 80s, when it reached the figure of 30%, 40% in some cases. And this, I'm talking about capitalist countries, okay, the developed, advanced countries. So the role of the state was accepted. What neoliberalism comes in and does, they ask the question that how do you believe that the government is going to solve the problems? Does government have the knowledge? Does government have the ability? Does government have the intention to do so? So these were the important questions that were asked. So they said, let's look at the government. What does it comprise of? Well, it comprises of politicians and bureaucrats. They are also human beings like everyone, and they work on self-interest. And they analyzed this behavior based on self-interest, and they found that, well, the government would also fail, just as you have market failures, you will also have government failures. So theoretically they said the government should be hemmed in, less and less control, less and less intervention by the government, and more control over the government is what they prescribed. That means that government is best which interferes least with the economy. And as a result of these policies, you had the government's role being redefined, regulation going. In the case of public utilities, you have the privatization of public utilities and so on. So you have these theories come in approximately 1970s and 1980s. So there is a change, there is a gap between what was liberal and what is neoliberal. And these theories say that government has no role, and the least role that is given to the government, the better it is. And let the private parties do it, the market do it. When the government is to be given a role, it is for creating markets, for creating property rights, so that the markets are able to operate. So this is the theoretical aspect of the neoliberal. What about the empirical aspect? When does it come in empirically, in real life? Well, politically you can say Reagan and Thatcher. So you have, when Reagan and Thatcher come in, they try and roll back the state, go in for mass privatization, go in for outsourcing and so many other processes, downsizing of the government and so on. But it also happens in developing countries. A large number of developing countries were growing reasonably well in the 1950s, 60s and 70s. But in the 70s what happened was that the oil prices started to go up because a cartel was formed. And as the oil prices went up, many of these developing countries, to continue with their high rates of growth, continued to borrow more and more, especially Latin America and Africa. They got more and more indebted to international banks, and these international banks were flush with funds because oil prices had gone up and the money was flowing to the oil exporting countries who were putting their money in the banks, and this money was then given as loans to governments in Latin America, Africa, and to a lesser extent to other places. In early 1980s, you have a sort of a crisis which comes in when when the coming of Reagan and Thatcher, mainly Reagan, increases the interest rate, and therefore money which was flowing to the Latin American countries started to come back. And all of these countries got into a problem. And then comes in these international agencies, the IMF and World Bank, which says that, well, the problem that you have is essentially because you are spending too much, and therefore and who is spending too much? It is the government. Therefore, what you should do is to stabilize your economy and grow at a faster rate. You should curtail the role of the government. So, and open up the economies. So from the 80s, you have a complete change in the direction that more and more of opening up, more and more of globalization, and more of restriction of the role of the government empirically in the developing countries, and of course with Reagan, Thatcher and other such phenomena in the developed countries. So the 1980s onwards, you have this change. Now, what is the effect of that change? The effect of that change has been, of course it's a large topic, but very simply, both positive and negative. One of the things that it has done good for countries like India and China, okay, and many other developing countries. What happened was, when a free market operates, when the government does nothing, then the capital started to move to areas which gives the highest rate of return. And they found in the 1990s that it is the developing countries with cheap labor. If you come and invest here, then with this cheap labor you can produce more and sell now to a global market and become rich very quickly. So there was this tremendous size of the market and cheap labor together with capital flows to the developing countries, which helped in indigenous growth also. So China and India started to grow rapidly, and so did the other developing countries. So one of the positive aspects of this period was that the India's and other countries started to shine as we had used the term. So with this capital inflows, you have simultaneously with the freeing of the government controls, you have a sort of growth or development which is standardly measured, that is the growth of per capita income or growth of GDP. Very surprisingly, growth does not take place in the developed countries because of this feature, that is cheaper labor is in the developing countries. During the period of about up to 2007, from early 90s, you have, or late 90s, you have the developing countries adding about 80% of the additional GDP of the world. That is about more than 75%, actually 77% of the incremental GDP comes from the developing countries. Within that, most comes from China, 32%, then comes India, 11%, and then comes US and others. So US becomes therefore only 8% and Europe 6%. So it is the developing countries which start to benefit tremendously as far as this phase of capital flows is concerned. But there is the other side of it, as I said, both positive and negative sides. What happens together is that inequalities start increasing. And especially in the developed countries, inequalities increase rapidly, but it is a feature everywhere. Almost every country you have increasing inequalities, and in the developed countries, especially the countries like US, you have a very rapidly increasing inequalities. They say inequalities, there are some figures which are very, very illuminating. One such figure is that in the 19s, this happens from 70s actually, but accelerated in the last two decades. What happens, for example, it is stated that the top 10%, the top 1% of the population was having about 8% of the incomes in US. In the 2007, just before the crisis, that figure had reached to the top 1% having more than 20% of the US income. So here you have a doubling of the share of the rich, that 1%. You also have within that 1%, you have that 0.1% whose share from being very little becomes almost 8 to 10%. That means very few insignificant sect of the population increase their wealth enormously. One study said that the two richest people in US, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, their 2% wealth was equal to the wealth of 120 million people of the US. Okay. So only 2%. So you have increasing inequalities. Most of the population does not increase their incomes, and therefore when you hear the battle cry in the Occupy Wall Street, they say we are the 99%, because the 99% has been ignored. So you have inequalities rising, and as a result of this rising inequalities, you have a lot of pressures which come in. The rich are not taxed anymore. In fact, we are told that if press reports are to be believed, that because of the influence of neoliberal ideas, which says that it's glorious to become rich, like Deng Xiaoping said. So you have this effect where the rich is not taxed, and the Iraq and Afghan wars were fought without much increase in tax rates in the US. So you have a policy which is favoring the rich and not favoring the others. So how do you deal with this problem? Well, one way to deal with this problem is to go in for social securities, which many countries went in for, which caused them further difficulties in what you call budgetary deficits and others. But there is another way in which some countries tried to deal with it, and that was to give cheap loan to the poor. And when the poor started getting the cheap loan, they started investing in real estate and so on, and that led to a crisis from which the world is still recovering, or just about recovering, which was called the subprime crisis. Because loans were given, and finally a bubble was created which finally burst. So you have this inequalities which is becoming, which may not be that bad as such, but it is affecting the whole sustainability of growth story in the world. So that is what makes it that you cannot have inequalities being addressed separately from the growth story, because inequalities have a nasty way of coming back and affecting your growth also. But we are not into economics, and we would like to look at some other features. And these other features are that what is the effect of this inequality? Well, there are many aspects that one can deal with, but there are a number of studies have been showing that it has a very bad effect on the society. There are many indicators, for example, the mental health, suicide rates, homicide rates. All of these are very strongly positively related with the level of inequality in the developed countries. And also one study showed that if you take the US states also taken together, that same sort of a regression result seems to hold. That is, the same relationship between the bad effects of inequality and inequality remain. Also, you have declining relation as far as trust is concerned, social mobility is concerned, and many of these sort of things that interest the sociologists and others, the political scientists. All these parameters started to have been showing that the society seems to be badly affected as a result of increasing inequalities. These are social effects in the form of mental health, school dropout rates or college dropout rates, and many other such relations. The children are also affected. There has been a UNICEF study which has shown that the children also, there is an index for child welfare which is negatively related to inequalities. So the question is that why is it that we are creating more and more of inequalities? The answer is, which has been coming up in this debate, that there seems to be a belief that, well, unless you increase, in the morning the speaker has had used another phrase, but I am using this phrase right now, that unless you increase the size of the cake, you cannot distribute it more. His phrase was that when the water rises, all the boats rise. So growth is necessary for increasing the levels of income. Well, which is only partially true, because what happens with this new technology and others is a large number of people are actually getting affected adversely also. And secondly, as the growth is happening, you have because wages are more or less constant, you have a huge number of people moving. There is another social impact. In India, you can see it. Someone presented a paper in the previous session on migration. You have a huge number of people moving from the villages to the towns, and the families remain behind. And they are all male, 20 to 40 years. They are married mostly or predominantly, because they are moving to provide for their families back at home. So an enclave type of development is leading to this type of problems of migration and the consequent problems related to migration, which is a huge issue. But as you had seen from the presentation, there is almost nothing that is being done to deal with this issue. Now, this migrant labor gives cheap labor, therefore huge amounts of profits which are available to the industries which are giving them cheap labor without any social security and any other commitment. So in India, you have this tremendous difference in incomes which are coming in, inequalities which are coming in, which is a positive side, you can say, but it is also causing positive side in the sense that some people are getting employment. But it is the negative side also in the sense that it is disrupting families, causing usage of labor in or promoting labor practices which are very, very unethical and inhuman. So having said this, let's ask the question that is it therefore necessary to go in for more and more growth? Well, here I would like to raise one or two issues and leave it to you for discussion. Now, do we need more of growth? Is one of the first questions that we need to ask. Well, in a country like India, yes, perhaps we need, and many other developing countries. But if you look at the world taken together, the world produces enough in per capita GDP terms to provide for an extended list of basic needs for all people. So the first point that needs to be said, that the world is producing more and more, distributing it more and more unequally, and as a result of it, we are always running to stay at the same place. The second point is, there is what is called the Easterlin paradox, which looked at the basic fundamental premise of economics, which said more consumption leads to more utility or happiness and satisfaction, and asked people directly the question that does it lead to, are you better off? And the answer came that with increase in per capita incomes, as the per capita incomes rise over a period, the levels of perceived happiness remain stagnant. So you are producing more and more, and but consuming more and more, but not happier anymore. Third thing that comes out is that if you have more and more inequality, then this perceived well-being, or what is called now the happiness index, gets adversely affected. I may be quite satisfied by getting my basic needs, but if I see someone else having a luxury car, then I feel very unhappy. Okay, so this is therefore the objective of human development must be questioned, and this is what we perhaps need to ask this question, that is it more and more of production or commodities that is the goal of human growth? Are there dimensions in human beings which are beyond this? And so on. Second question is that, well, does the assumption of each one to himself or selfishness, would that help in the process of growth? Does it help in the process of happiness and so on, or process of inclusion? And the answer in many of these cases are perhaps well anticipated, and I think this is an area which we need to think about and work on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Banerjee, for a very enriching and enlightening talk on a very complex issue. Professor Banerjee has in fact raised many issues concerning the whole society and the whole system and the impacts and interrelationships. And I think he has left many things open to the discussion. Therefore, if any one of you wants to ask or ask any question or make some brief observation, should we?
Let's give chance to everyone.
So, any questions or observations?
Criticisms? You can ask. It's like knowing your views also.
Any questions?
All right. To remind the speakers to kindly confine themselves to 3 to 4 minutes. They should give us a brief summary of what they really want to say on the theme neoliberalism, development, inequality and social inclusion. We have almost 12 to 13 speakers this session, so therefore please confine yourself to 3 to 4 minutes of your talk. I first of all invite Professor Deepa Parekh.
Namaskar. I will be presenting my paper on social inclusion through corporate social responsibility. To begin with, when we talk of business, we have to realize that the businessman, before he became a businessman, was first a citizen. And therefore, the first responsibility of the businessman lies in taking care or contributing something towards the society. And as a result of which we have something that is called the social responsibility. We have the social responsibility pyramid, at the bottom of which is the economic responsibility, which says that the business should be such that it is profitable. It should take into consideration the needs or the requirements, or it should be able to provide the goods and services that are required by the people, but at the same time it should be profitable. Then this is the base on which the entire pyramid rests. Then we have legal responsibility, which says obey the law, go according to the rules and regulations. Next is the ethical responsibility, which says be ethical, do what is right. And the last one is the philanthropic responsibility, which says be a good citizen, contribute towards the betterment of the quality of life of the society or of all the people belonging to the society. So then related to this, then we come to the concept of corporate social responsibility, which is a concept where the companies decide voluntarily to contribute to a better society and a cleaner environment. So corporate social responsibility basically deals with what companies do with their profits, and apart from this, how they earn their profits. So it is basically it refers to how the corporations or firms conduct their business in a way that is ethical, society friendly and beneficial to community in terms of development. The phrase, the triple bottom line, which was first coined in 1994 by John Elkington, who believed that the companies should be preparing 3 different bottom lines. The first is the common traditional measure of corporate profit, where at the end of the account you have the profit or loss. That is a traditional concept that we have been following. The second is the bottom line of company's people account, which is a measure of some shape or form of how socially responsible an organization has been throughout its operations. The third is the bottom line of the company's planet account, which is a measure of how environmentally responsible it has been. So here then the triple bottom line basically deals with 3 P's. We have the profit, people and planet. It measures the financial, social and the environmental performance of the corporation over a period of time. Now if we take the environment and the social performance on one side, and if we take the financial performance on the one side, then in the short run 2 possibilities are there. Number 1, it could be a win-win situation. Or number 2, it could be a win-lose situation also, where the financial performance wise there is a lose, the company is at a loss. But ultimately in the long run, the firms which adopt corporate social responsibility as a part of the agenda will definitely enjoy a goodwill which would give better results, or which would give positive results as far as the financial performance of the company is concerned. Now there are certain factors which are pushing the businesses or into the corporate social responsibility. Of course, the most important factor is like in India also in March 2013 they've come out with the act which says that there are certain conditions that they've given, that those companies which come under those conditions will have to contribute at least 2% of their net profit tax towards corporate social responsibility. So that is one push that the business has, which basically moves the business towards the corporate social responsibility. The other ones are where you have the expanding role of the private sector and the simultaneous shrinking of the government sector. After we adopted the new economic policy, we had the LPG, as it is called, liberalization, privatization and globalization, as a result of which the role of the government has been reduced. Now if the role of the government has been reduced, then automatically it means the private sector will have to take over a greater responsibility of providing or taking care of the society. Apart from this, there is a greater demand for disclosure, the accountability on the part of the businesses towards their stakeholders, which could be their suppliers, their customers, the people, their employees, has increased. They are now more accountable for whatever they are doing. Apart from this, there is an increase in the consumer, the consumer interest is also there. When we as consumers go, we would also like to go in for a company which is which is doing something for the society, which is using practices which are environment friendly and which is making the best use of, as we call, the limited resources that we have. Then there is growing investor pressure. Again, investment also will go in those areas which would give good returns. Apart from that, where the ethical consideration is also taken. And the employees also would like to go in for a company which provides a good work environment. And so if the company wants to hire good people, skilled people, good people, and it wants to retain its good workers, it will have to provide a positive work environment or work culture. And so what the corporations are doing for the employees, their families and for the society as a whole is what is important. Then the benefits that come to the company as a result of this is that those corporations that are involved in the corporate social responsibility practices would have a better customer loyalty, and the number of customers would increase, because as I told you, as customers we are more attached to those companies which we know are helping the society and which are working for which are taking care of ensuring that the environmental aspect is taken into consideration when the production processes and all the packing and all is taken into consideration. Apart from this, the companies which are involved in corporate social responsibilities also get a greater media coverage. And the media coverage will also lead to enhanced brand image and reputation. Then, as I told you, because of the better work environment, the workers get a better work environment, as a result of which the retention of the workers and hiring of workers for the company becomes easier. Then it also leads to lowering of the operating cost, because it leads to an increase in the efficiency, and because when environment friendly processes of production are used, it means less energy is being used. More investors would be coming because of the attraction of the companies being involved in corporate social responsibility. The workers are more efficient because they get a better environment. All these collectively lead to an improvement in the efficiency and also a reduction in the cost of production. The community at large would of course enjoy the benefits, because whatever is done by way of the corporate social responsibility goes to the community. Environment wise, of course, it also leads to a better use of the resources and a more judicious use of the resources. Now, we can now discuss the issues and challenges that are involved in the corporate social responsibility. First of all, there is a lack of understanding amongst the corporates and also amongst the local agencies. As a result of this lack of understanding or coordination, there is duplication of efforts. I think I can give the suggestion simultaneously. So the suggestion that can be given for this is, there has to be awareness created amongst the people, amongst the communities, amongst overall there, so that people become more aware of what is happening, what the companies, and between the corporations also there has to be a proper understanding. Then apart from this, there's lack of interest on the part of the local communities that are participating and contributing to the corporate social responsibilities, because there is little or no knowledge about the corporate social responsibilities. And if people don't know what is happening, then they will not be able to enjoy the benefits. And apart from this, there is lack of a well-organized non-governmental organization in the rural and the remote areas, because it is these organizations which can assess and identify the real needs of the community. The corporations can't do it at their level. They have to have someone working at the grassroots level who is able to come in contact with the people or living at that level and identify their needs and their needs. So the steps that we can take would be, the first is creating awareness about the corporate social responsibility. Second is to avoid duplication. There can be an agenda that is made at the national level, or a broad development agenda can be made where everything is done in a planned manner, rather than everyone working towards health, all corporations working towards health, all working towards education, all working towards women empowerment. So rather than that, a proper division can be made area-wise and according to the sphere, whatever they want to work in. Apart from this, the corporate houses and non-government organizations should pool their resources so that a larger amount of resources are made available for the social cause. And then it is also important that most of the corporate social responsibility practices are limited to the urban areas. So it's the rural areas are left out. So it is important that apart from the urban areas, the rural areas are also covered, so that, and it's not that we don't want, or that the urban areas don't have problems. The problems are more and maybe in the urban areas, but the rural areas also have problems which are related to women, education, so those also have to be considered. And in the end, I would just like to state a few instruments that can be adopted by the government. Because the government cannot just sit and watch what's happening. It will also have to participate. So first is the information instrument, which is basically related to the persuasion part, where campaigns campaigns to raise awareness about the corporate social responsibilities are made. Then the economic instruments, where economic incentives like subsidies, tax concessions can be given to encourage the corporate social responsibility practices, and legal instruments like law directions and regulations can be adopted.
Assistant Professor, the Indian Law Institute, Delhi.
The title to my paper is Law and Politics vis-a-vis Social Exclusion in India. Now briefly, the objective of my paper is twofold. One is to highlight how social exclusion has become a very operational concept as far as law and politics is concerned, meaning thereby that it is one of the parameters or standards for ascertaining policy and laws today. Secondly, because of this change, there are visible standards which have evolved globally as well as nationally, on the basis of which the state is in a position to identify or deal with perhaps the problem of social exclusion. Now, just simply to give impetus to the proposition I'm trying to make, social exclusion, if we say, is nothing but a condition wherein individuals or groups are denied or are unable to participate or enjoy resources, just like the people who are perhaps not excluded. Because of this fact of exclusion, over the years it has been realized within legal systems that there has emerged a trend wherein exclusion has led communities or groups to move in a direction which is towards violence, frustration, unrest, or maybe excessive demands being made before the state for reform in specific areas. Now, because of these reasons and because of a lot of studies indicating like urban riots or groupism or violence within states is particularly or closely related to the fact of social exclusion. So should it not be one of the rigid parameters which the state should take into consideration while formulating laws? So because of this reason, what we understand today is social exclusion is a parameter for lawmaking and policy formulation. How do we gather that impression? I'll take an example of a very recent legislation, 2014. This is the Street Vendors Protection of Livelihood and Regulation of Activities Act. Now, a background, since it's dealing with street vendors and the act comes in 2014. Now, it is not that it is this year or the year before that street vending or the interests of street vendors became important to the state. Now, a lot of academic literature, a lot of non-governmental organizations over the years have indicated that street vending has become an urban necessity. It is because individuals are compelled, owing to reasons, to migrate to cities. There is excessive unemployment, there is no livelihood, there is a lot of displacement. So because of these reasons, you see an increase in street vendors there being in urban cities. Now, this being a fact taken into consideration by courts, because magnitude of cases being filed over the years where street vendors, because of the law not taking into consideration their interests and the fact that they are an eyesore to a great extent to those who are not excluded in urban cities, the courts have started to say that they have something called a right to livelihood, right to dignity. So all these years of effort by the courts to carve out that these communities may not be economically dependent or excluded, but because of their position, because of what they stand as a class, they are excluded in the manner of the way they are treated. So what is taken into consideration is the fact that the processes of law have been over the years quite difficult on this particular class as it is identified today. So if you look at the 2014 legislation, there are two important aspects. One is that it says that street vendors, if they have a certified or if they are registered with the state body, no authority, particularly the police, can take any action against their interests as far as street vending is concerned, which is seen to be a very monumental task taken by this particular legislation, meaning that the law is incorporating an inclusive approach wherein it has understood that this class cannot be kept away from what we call, supposedly feel is an urban or rural divide, which is reflected in the urban cities. So academic literature has pushed in the vision of the judiciary, because of the court cases that have come over the years, have led to sort of a reconciliation on very debated topics like critical urbanism or this rural-urban divide, and it's more a movement towards integration between the two. So this legislation you can multiply, you have, there are visible attempts in terms of policy as well as lawmaking to take into issues like